When I had my stroke, my wife and my own brother saw an opportunity. They saw a weak old man who could no longer manage his own life, a collection of assets ready to be taken. They did not know that a contractor, even a sick one, never forgets the blueprints to the house he built. My revenge was not a dramatic confrontation. It was a foundation crack, a building code violation, and a final inspection that turned their inheritance into a pile of worthless rubble. They thought they had a solid plan. They were about to learn that I was the only one who knew where the cracks were. Before we get to the foundation of this story, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what is the most important thing to check before you trust someone completely? My name is David Harrison, and at 69 years old, my hands are starting to fail me. Here in the dry, clear heat of Phoenix, Arizona, I am a retired building contractor. For 45 years, my life was about solid things, about concrete, steel, and the unchangeable truth of a level line. I built things that were meant to last. My wife, Linda, and I built a good life. We raised a family. We were a solid partnership, or so I believed. My younger brother, Michael, was always a part of that life. He was the charming one, the salesman, while I was the quiet builder. I always looked out for him, helped him with loans, gave him work when he needed it. I thought our bond was as solid as any foundation I had ever poured. The stroke happened on a Tuesday in May. It was not a massive one, but it was enough. It left me with a weakened left side and a frustrating tremor in my hand. My mind was still sharp, my memory intact, but my body had betrayed me. I could no longer drive. I could no longer manage the simple upkeep of my home or my several rental properties. Linda and Michael stepped in immediately, their concern a suffocating, constant presence. They became my caregivers, my connection to the outside world. "David, you just need to rest," Linda would say, fluffing my pillows with a little too much force. "Let us handle the details. You've worked hard enough your whole life." Michael became the manager of my affairs. He would sit at my desk, going through my financial records, his face a mask of serious, brotherly concern. "Your portfolio is a bit of a mess, David," he would say, his pen tapping on a stack of papers. "All these properties, the maintenance, the taxes. It's too much for you to worry about now. We need to simplify things, for your own good." Their logic seemed sound. I was weak. I was dependent. And their solution, the constant, gentle pressure to consolidate my assets, to give them control, just to make things easier, felt like an act of love. They spoke of power of attorney, not as a surrender, but as a sensible precaution. They saw my hesitation not as a sign of my sharp mind, but as a symptom of my condition, a stubborn old man's refusal to accept his own limitations. The first real sign that their concern was not what it seemed was a small, insignificant detail that only a contractor would notice. I had a state-of-the-art security system installed in my house years ago, a system I had wired myself. It had a discreet, hidden camera that covered the main living room, a feature I had installed after a string of neighborhood break-ins. It fed to a secure, private server, a digital ghost in my own machine. One afternoon, while they thought I was napping, I used a tablet by my chair to check the archived footage from the previous week. I was not looking for anything in particular. I was just bored. But then I saw it. It was footage from a late evening, after I had gone to bed. It showed Linda and Michael in my living room. They were not talking about my care. They were in each other's arms. A passionate, desperate embrace. It was a complete and total betrayal. The affair was a shock, but it was the conversation I heard next that turned my heartbreak into a cold, hard anger. They were not just lovers. They were business partners. And my life's work was the business they were planning to liquidate. I watched the recorded footage on my tablet, the screen showing the two people I trusted most in the world confirming their betrayal. The sight of their embrace was a physical blow. But the words I heard next were the ones that truly mattered. "He's getting weaker, Linda," my brother Michael said, his voice a low whisper. "The doctors say he could have another, more serious stroke at any time. We need to get the power of attorney signed before that happens." Linda pulled away from him, her expression not of a lover, but of a co-conspirator. "He's still fighting it," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. "He still thinks he's the man who can build the skyscraper. He doesn't see that he can even climb a flight of stairs without help." "Then we'll have to push harder," Michael replied. "The market is at its peak. If we can get control of the properties now, we can sell the entire portfolio as a package deal before the next downturn. We're talking about a fortune, Linda. Enough for us to finally get out of this town and live the life we've always talked about." The conversation continued, a cold, hard discussion of asset liquidation, market timing, and their shared, secret future. They spoke of my life's work, the collection of properties I had spent 45 years building, as a pile of cash they were impatient to spend. The turning point was not an emotional one. It was a cold, hard, and deeply practical realization. My wife and my brother were not just having an affair. They were engaged in a conspiracy to seize my assets, using my poor health as their primary tool of leverage. My weakness was their opportunity. I did not delete the recording. I saved it to a secure, encrypted file on the server. It was my first piece of hard evidence. The next few weeks were a quiet, desperate battle of wills. I had to appear weak and confused, to let them believe their campaign of pressure was working, while my mind was racing, analyzing the situation like a contractor reviewing a flawed blueprint. They escalated their efforts. Linda would accidentally leave unpaid bills on my desk where I could see them, murmuring about how difficult it was to keep up with everything. Michael would bring by complex financial documents, overwhelming me with jargon and numbers, trying to prove that my affairs were too complicated for me to manage. They were building a case for my incompetence, a case they presented to me daily, with loving, sorrowful expressions on their faces. I knew I could not fight them on their terms. A legal battle would be a war of attrition, one I might not have the health or the time to win. My revenge had to be something different. It had to be a trap built on a foundation only I understood. My most valuable asset, the one they coveted most, was a small, recently completed apartment building in a rapidly gentrifying part of Phoenix. It was my final project before the stroke, a beautiful 4-story building I had designed and built myself. I called it the Harrison. On paper, it was a gold mine, the crown jewel of my portfolio. But I knew something about that building that they did not. I knew its secret. During the final phase of construction, my primary concrete supplier had delivered a bad batch. The concrete used for the main, load-bearing support columns in the underground parking garage had failed its initial stress tests. It was a minor, almost imperceptible flaw, but a flaw nonetheless. I had, of course, rectified the problem immediately. I had spent a fortune of my own money to encase the flawed columns in reinforced steel jackets, a fix that was 100% structurally sound and perfectly legal. But the original flawed concrete was still in there, a hidden secret inside the steel. The city inspectors had signed off on the fix, but the report, the one detailing the original, failed stress test, was filed deep in the city's archives. It was a public record, but one a lazy or cost-cutting buyer might never find. My plan began to form, a plan built not with steel and concrete, but with information and misdirection. I would let them have what they wanted. I would agree to sell the Harrison, but I would guide them subtly to a specific type of buyer, a buyer who would be their worst nightmare. And I would make sure that the one crucial piece of information about the building's hidden flaw remained my own, private and devastatingly powerful secret. What is more dangerous, a visible, obvious threat, or a hidden, structural weakness that no one can see? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and hit the like button if you think a solid plan is being built. The full scope of their betrayal became my daily reality. Every feigned look of concern from my wife, every piece of helpful advice from my brother was now an insult. They saw a sick old man in a chair. They did not see the contractor who was mentally reviewing every blueprint, every contract, every building code violation he had ever encountered, searching for the perfect tool for his revenge. My plan required a specific type of buyer for the Harrison, someone whose own business practices were as ruthless and as legally aggressive as my brother's. I needed a shark to catch a shark. My opportunity came in the form of a conversation I overheard on the hidden camera. Michael was on the phone with a commercial real estate broker discussing the potential sale of my properties. "We need a quick, all-cash buyer," Michael said. "Someone who won't get bogged down in a lot of red tape. A private equity firm, maybe." He mentioned a name, a firm called Apex Holdings, known throughout the Southwest for their aggressive, lightning-fast acquisitions. They were notorious for buying properties, making superficial upgrades, and then flipping them for a massive profit, often cutting corners on due diligence to close deals quickly. They were perfect. Apex Holdings was the buyer I would have chosen myself. The immediate consequence was that I had to accelerate my own decline in their eyes. I needed them to feel a sense of urgency, to believe that my time was running out, and that a quick deal with a firm like Apex was their only option. I began to play my part with a new level of commitment. I would feign memory lapses, pretending to forget conversations we had just had. I would let my hand tremble more noticeably when I tried to drink a glass of water. I allowed myself to appear weaker, more confused, more dependent with each passing day. It was a humiliating, soul-crushing performance, but it was working. Linda and Michael's concern became more frantic, their pressure to get the power of attorney more intense. They saw a man fading away and a window of opportunity that was about to close. I finally, reluctantly, agreed. I had my own lawyer, a trusted old friend, review the document they had prepared. He confirmed was an ironclad transfer of power. I sat at my dining room table, the two of them watching me with hungry, expectant eyes, and with a shaky, practiced hand, I signed the document. The look of triumphant, greedy relief on their faces was a thing of terrible, clarifying beauty. They thought they had just won. In reality, they had just armed the bomb I had built for them. With the power of attorney in hand, Michael moved with incredible speed. Just as I had predicted, he immediately contacted Apex Holdings. He presented the Harrison not as a single property, but as the cornerstone of a portfolio of a dying man, a distressed asset that required a quick, uncomplicated sale. Apex, smelling a bargain, was immediately interested. While Michael was negotiating the deal, I was engaged in my own quiet preparations. I knew that Apex, for all their aggression, would still perform a basic title search and a building inspection. My plan was not to hide the truth, but to make it appear as if I had. I went into my old office and found my original paper copy of the city inspector's report, the one detailing the flawed concrete and the steel reinforcement fix. It was a thick, complex document. I took a single crucial page from the middle of the report, the page that detailed the initial failed stress test results, and I accidentally spilled a cup of coffee on it, smudging the key numbers and technical data into an unreadable mess. I then placed this doctored, damaged report in a prominent, easily accessible file folder on my desk, labeled The Harrison Final Inspection. It was a piece of beautiful, subtle misdirection. When the Apex inspectors came to review the building's paperwork, they would find the report. They would see the coffee stain, and they would likely assume it was the clumsy mistake of a sick old man. They would see the final, approved inspection certificate, and satisfied that the building was legally sound, they would not bother to go to the city archives to pull the clean, original copy. They would see a minor, resolved issue. They would have no idea that the smudge on that page was hiding a multi-million-dollar lie of omission. My final move was to write a letter. It was a simple one-page letter, written in my own, now shaky handwriting. It was addressed to the CEO of Apex Holdings. It was not a confession. It was an anonymous tip. It simply said, "Before you finalize your purchase of the Harrison building, you may want to pull the original, unredacted copy of the final engineering report from the city archives. Specifically, file number 7-4B. Some things are worth a second look." I sealed the letter in a plain, white envelope. I would not mail it. I would have it hand-delivered by a courier at the perfect, most damaging possible moment. My children were about to close the biggest deal of their lives. They were about to sell a beautiful, flawed building to a notoriously litigious and utterly ruthless buyer, all while believing they had a clean, simple, and profitable transaction. They had no idea that I had just handed the shark a map to the blood in the water. Is a lie of omission still a lie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The final weeks before the closing were a masterclass in deception, with me as the silent director. My decision to feign a deeper decline was paying dividends. Linda and Michael treated me like a piece of fragile, antique furniture, a man who was present in body but absent in mind. They would have hushed urgent conversations in front of me, believing I could no longer follow the complexities of their business dealings. They did not know that my mind, freed from the burden of managing my own life, was now entirely focused on the intricate mechanics of their downfall. From their conversations, I learned the details of the deal Michael had struck with Apex Holdings. It was a fast, all-cash offer, but it was significantly below the building's true market value. Apex was leveraging my declining health and Michael's eagerness to close quickly. Michael, blinded by the sheer size of the check, saw it as a massive win. He had no idea he was selling a prime asset at a discount, all while unwittingly accepting a huge, hidden liability. The plan was in motion. The inspection for the Harrison was scheduled. As predicted, the Apex team, a group of young, aggressive men in sharp suits, came to my house to review the building's paperwork before visiting the site. Michael, playing the part of the competent, in-control manager, laid out the files for them on my dining room table. I watched from my armchair as one of the young men picked up the file labeled "The Harrison Final Inspection." He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the technical data. He paused at the page with the coffee stain. I saw him hold it up to the light, squinting at the smudged, unreadable numbers of the failed stress test. Then, just as I had hoped, he shrugged and flipped to the last page, the clean, signed, and legally binding certificate of occupancy. The misdirection had worked perfectly. To him, it was a minor inconvenience, a bit of sloppy paperwork from a sick old man. The final approval was all that mattered. He had no reason to waste a day at the city archives for a clean copy. The inspection of the building itself was a similar exercise in superficiality. Michael took them to the underground parking garage. He showed them the massive steel-encased support columns. "As you can see," Michael said, his voice echoing in the concrete space, "this building is over-engineered. My father didn't cut corners. It's solid as a rock." He was lying, but he was also, unknowingly, telling the truth. The building was solid, thanks to my expensive, unmentioned fix. The lie was not in the structure. It was in the story he was telling. He was selling them a perfect building, not a perfectly repaired one. The distinction was a subtle, but multi-million-dollar, legal time bomb. With the inspection complete and the buyer satisfied, the closing was scheduled for the following Friday. My lawyer had already prepared the necessary documents, ensuring that the proceeds from the sale would flow directly into the account that Linda and Michael now controlled. I was giving them everything they wanted, a clear, unimpeded path to their fortune. My final preparation was the timing of my anonymous letter. I knew I could not send it too early. Apex might pull out of the deal before the closing. leaving me with a still possessed, but now suspicious asset. I could not send it too late. The money would already be gone, wired to an offshore account. It had to arrive at the perfect, most damaging moment. I instructed the courier to deliver the letter to the CEO of Apex Holdings at exactly 1 hour after the scheduled closing time. This would give Michael and Linda enough time to sign the papers, to feel the brief, exhilarating thrill of their victory. But it would be before the massive wire transfer had been fully and irrevocably processed by the banking system. It was a narrow, precise window of opportunity. The morning of the closing, Linda and Michael came to my room to say goodbye before they left for the title company. They were glowing, their faces alight with a greedy, triumphant excitement. "This is it, David," Linda said, kissing my forehead. Her kiss felt as cold as a final, clinical touch. "The beginning of our new life. You just rest. We'll be back this afternoon, and you won't have to worry about a thing ever again." "We'll take good care of everything, brother," Michael added, clapping me on the shoulder with a false, hearty camaraderie. I watched them leave, two smartly dressed predators on their way to collect their kill. They thought this was the end of the story. They had no idea it was the beginning of a new, much more expensive and much more painful chapter. The courier was on his way. The letter was in his hand. And the quiet, simple truth was about to hit the ruthlessly litigious world of corporate real estate with the force of a wrecking ball. Before the final act, a question for you. Please hit the like button if you believe that a secret, once revealed, can be more powerful than any weapon. In the comments below, tell me, is it ever possible for a foundation of lies to support a successful future? The closing took place at a downtown title company, a sterile, glass-walled office high above the city. I was not there, of course. I was in my quiet house, sitting in my armchair, a silent, distant observer in the final act of my own financial drama. My lawyer, however, was present, not as my representative, but as a quiet, professional witness, there to ensure the paperwork was in order. He called me with updates, his voice a low, calm murmur on the other end of the line. At 10 o'clock, he confirmed that Linda and Michael had arrived, their faces a picture of smug satisfaction. At 10:30, he confirmed that the representatives from Apex Holdings were present and that the signing had begun. I pictured the scene, my wife and my brother, their hands moving with a greedy, eager speed as they signed away a building whose true history they had never bothered to learn. They were so close to the finish line, so blinded by the multi-million-dollar prize, that they had no sense of the storm that was gathering just over the horizon. The plan was in motion. At exactly 11 o'clock, my lawyer confirmed that the final documents had been signed. The Harrison building now belonged to Apex Holdings. The wire transfer of the funds, a massive life-altering sum, had been initiated. In the world of high finance, however, a transfer of that magnitude is not instantaneous. It enters a brief electronic limbo, a processing period that can take several hours before the funds are cleared and irrevocably settled. This was the narrow, crucial window my entire plan depended on. At exactly 12 o'clock noon, 1 hour after the signing, my courier, a punctual and reliable young man, walked into the gleaming marble lobby of the Apex Holdings corporate headquarters. He delivered the simple white envelope, addressed to the CEO, to the executive receptionist. The letter, my anonymous single-sentence time bomb, was now inside the building. The fuse was lit. I had my lawyer on the phone, on an open line, as the drama unfolded. He was still at the title company, finalizing the last tedious details of the transaction. He described the scene. Linda and Michael were celebrating, their voices a little too loud, their laughter a little too sharp. They were drinking coffee, their victory so complete, so absolute, that they were in no hurry to leave. And then, at 12:15, Michael's cell phone rang. My lawyer watched as Michael's face, which had been flushed with triumph, suddenly went pale. His confident posture dissolved. He began to stammer into the phone, his words a jumble of confusion and panicked denials. "No, that's not possible," my lawyer heard him say. "The inspection was clean. The report." He trailed off, a look of dawning, sickening horror on his face. The call, I knew, was from the CEO of Apex, a man who had just read my anonymous tip, a man who had just had his own legal team pull the clean, original copy of the inspection report from the city archives, a man who now understood that he had just purchased a multi-million-dollar property with a significant, undisclosed structural flaw. The conversation on the phone ended. Michael just stood there, the phone in his hand, his face the color of wet cement. He looked at Linda, his eyes wide with a terror that she did not yet understand. "There's a problem," he whispered, his voice a hoarse croak. "A big problem." The final piece of the plan was the one I had put in place weeks ago. I had my lawyer, with the power of attorney I had so reluctantly signed, create a new, private, and completely secure trust account in my name at a different bank. The moment he heard the panic in Michael's voice, the moment he knew the Apex deal was about to implode, he made a single, quiet phone call. He used his legal authority, the very authority they had forced upon me, to issue an immediate, emergency stop and redirect order on the incoming wire transfer. The massive sum of money, which was still in its electronic limbo, was rerouted, not to the account controlled by Linda and Michael, but to my own, new, and utterly inaccessible trust. The trap had sprung. It was a perfect three-pronged attack. The lie had been exposed. The buyer was now a furious, litigious adversary. And the money, the entire point of their cruel and sordid enterprise, had vanished into thin air, redirected by the very legal weapon they had placed in my hands. They were left with nothing but a broken deal, a furious, powerful new enemy, and the cold, hard, and now completely undeniable truth of their own catastrophic greed. Is a betrayal more painful when it is a slow, creeping poison, or a single, sudden, and devastating blow? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button if you appreciate a plan that is built to last. The scene in the title company's conference room, as my lawyer described it, was a complete and total implosion. The moment Michael hung up the phone with the enraged CEO of Apex Holdings, the fragile, celebratory atmosphere shattered. Linda, her face a mask of confusion, rushed to his side. "What is it? What's wrong?" she demanded. "The concrete," Michael stammered, the words catching in his throat. "There was a report, a failed stress test. He says we committed fraud. He says he's going to sue us into oblivion." But before the full weight of the lawsuit could even settle on them, the second blow landed. Michael's phone rang again. It was his banker. The banker's voice was cold and professional. He was calling to inform Michael that the massive wire transfer from Apex Holdings, the fortune they had been celebrating just moments before, had been officially and irrevocably stopped and rerouted to a different account by a legal order from a power of attorney. The money was gone. For a long, silent moment, they just stared at each other, their minds clearly unable to process the sheer, brutal totality of their defeat. They had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and left with absolutely nothing. And then their partnership, a bond forged in greed and deceit, dissolved into a flurry of bitter, panicked accusations. "You told me the building was perfect." Linda shrieked at Michael, her voice a raw, ugly sound. "You said you checked everything. How was I supposed to know?" He shot back, his face a mask of furious self-preservation. "He hid it. The old man, he set us up. He was playing us the whole time." And that was the moment my lawyer chose to intervene. He stood up, his presence calm and authoritative in the midst of their chaos. He looked at my wife and my brother, at the two people who had so callously plotted to strip a sick man of his life's work, and he delivered the final, quiet verdict. "My client, Mr. Harrison," he began, his voice as cold and as hard as polished steel, "is a contractor. A man who has spent his entire life understanding that the most important part of any structure is its foundation. You two, on the other hand, built your entire plan on a foundation of lies. And a foundation of lies, he said, letting the words hang in the air, will always, always crumble. He then placed a single new document on the table in front of them. It was a formal legal revocation of the power of attorney they had so eagerly, so cruelly, tricked me into signing. My client is now once again in full and complete control of his own affairs, my lawyer stated. Your services are no longer required. The climax was not a single explosive event. It was a rapid, systematic, and complete demolition of their entire world. They had lost the deal. They were facing a catastrophic lawsuit from a ruthless and powerful enemy. And they had lost the money, the very prize for which they had sacrificed their honor, their integrity, and their family. They were left with nothing but the ruins of their own greed. They had walked into that room as rich, triumphant conquerors. They would walk out as bankrupt, disgraced fools, facing a future of legal battles and financial ruin. And I, the frail, sick old man they had so profoundly underestimated, was once again the sole, quiet, and undisputed master of the house I had built. My revenge was not just in their failure. It was in the beautiful, simple, and undeniable truth of a well-executed plan. A plan that was, like all my best work, built to last. When a conspiracy of lies finally collapses, what is the most satisfying sound? The shouting and accusations, or the quiet, stunned silence of defeat? Hit the subscribe button if you believe in solid foundations, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. The aftermath of their failed closing was a quiet and brutal affair. As predicted, Apex Holdings filed a massive lawsuit against my brother and wife, citing fraud and deliberate misrepresentation. The legal battle was, I was told, a slow and grinding war of attrition that consumed what little resources they had left. They were forced to sell their own homes, to liquidate their own assets, to fight a losing battle against a corporate giant with infinitely deeper pockets. They were not just defeated, they were systematically dismantled. I did not participate in the lawsuit. I was not a witness. I was not a party to it. My lawyer had provided Apex with a single sworn affidavit confirming the authenticity of the original, unredacted inspection report. That was all. I had built the trap, and I had simply walked away, leaving them to the predictable and inevitable consequences of their own choices. Linda and I divorced. It was a quiet, uncontested proceeding. She was a broken woman, her life of imagined luxury replaced by a grim reality of legal fees and public shame. She did not ask for anything in the settlement. She knew there was nothing left to ask for. She moved to another state to live with a cousin, a silent, unceremonious end to our 45-year partnership. Michael's fate was similar. He lost his business, his reputation, and his home. The last I heard, he was working as a used car salesman in a small town on the other side of the state. The charming, ambitious man who had seen himself as a titan of industry was gone, replaced by a man haunted by the ghost of a fortune he had held in his hands for a single fleeting moment. My life, on the other hand, began a slow, steady process of rebuilding. With the money safely back under my own control, I was able to focus on the one thing that truly mattered, my health. I found the best doctors, the best physical therapists. My recovery from the stroke was a long and arduous process, a daily battle of small, incremental victories, learning to tie my own shoes, being able to grip a pen without my hand shaking. But with each small success, I felt a piece of my old self returning. A few months after the divorce, I sold the Harrison. I sold it to an honest, reputable local builder, and I provided him with the full, unredacted inspection reports from the very beginning. I sold it at a fair price, a price that reflected its true repaired value. The money from that sale, along with the rest of my consolidated assets, I placed into a simple, secure trust, a trust that would provide for my own care for the rest of my days. My revenge was not in the dramatic, public ruin of my wife and brother. My true and lasting victory was in the quiet, mundane details of my own recovery. It was in the simple, profound joy of being able to walk to the corner store by myself. It was in the quiet satisfaction of being able to manage my own finances, to pay my own bills. It was in the simple, undeniable fact that I was still here, still in control, still the master of my own solid and well-built life. I had faced a catastrophic structural failure in my own family, and I had done what I had always done. I had assessed the damage, I had drawn up a new blueprint, and I had quietly, patiently, and methodically rebuilt. And the new foundation, I knew, was stronger than the old one had ever been. That is how I got my so sweet revenge, and I would do it all over again. Thank you for following my story. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what you believe is the most important quality for a strong foundation, in a building or in a life.